What if I told you your children might secretly feel hurt, frustrated, or even resentful toward you, and you don't even realize it? It sounds harsh, maybe even unfair. After all, you gave them everything. You worked hard, sacrificed, put food on the table, and stayed up during those long, feverish nights. You were there, you did your best. But here's the truth many seniors never hear. Sometimes the emotional wounds don't come from what you didn't do, but from the things you still don't see. You might believe your relationship is strong. You might think the distance, the silence, or the short replies are just part of kids being busy these days. But underneath those quiet moments, something might be growing. Regret, bitterness, emotional distance. And unless you're willing to face it with an open heart, things may never truly heal. In this video, we'll gently uncover 5 surprising reasons why your children may be quietly holding something against you. And more importantly, what you can do to bring warmth, understanding, and closeness back into your family again. Because it's never too late to reconnect, but only if you start now. If you've made it to this point, it means you care. You care deeply about your family, your children, and the relationships that matter most in your life. And that alone makes you different. It makes you wise. The truth is, aging brings a lot of wisdom, but it can also bring blind spots. Sometimes we don't realize how certain words, habits, or even well-meaning advice can quietly hurt the people we love most. This video isn't about blame. It's not about pointing fingers or making you feel guilty. It's about understanding, about giving you the tools to recognize the little things that may be pushing your children away without you knowing it. Today, I'll share with you 5 powerful, eye-opening truths about how your behavior after 70 might be affecting your relationship with your children, and what you can do to change that starting today. And if this message speaks to you so far, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. We share stories, insights, and gentle reminders designed just for you, because your experience still matters, and it always will. Now let's begin with the first reason, and it might surprise you. 1. You dismiss their adult problems like they're still teenagers. One of the most common but least recognized reasons adult children quietly pull away is when their parents, often without meaning to, treat their struggles as less valid, as if they're still just kids going through a teenage phase. It may start with a comment like, "Oh, you're overthinking," or "That's nothing," back in my day. But to your adult child, those words can feel like a dismissal of everything they're carrying. Carol and Nancy are both 72 years old. They meet for tea every Thursday and often talk about their grown children. Carol's daughter, Jenna, is 43, married, and juggling 2 teenagers, a demanding full-time job, and a husband recently laid off. Jenna had called her mom in tears one night, overwhelmed and anxious. But instead of comfort, Carol responded with, "You think that's hard? Try raising 3 kids with no dishwasher and no money." Carol meant it as encouragement, a tough love reminder that things used to be harder. But Jenna didn't hear love. She heard invalidation. She didn't call back for weeks. Nancy, on the other hand, listens differently. When her son Kyle vents about his boss or the pressures of parenting, she simply says, "That sounds tough. Want to talk more about it?" Nancy doesn't try to solve it. She just shows up. That difference, that emotional posture, makes all the difference. Psychologically, adult children crave acknowledgement from their parents, especially in times of stress. Studies from the American Psychological Association have shown that emotional validation from parents, even late in life, helps reinforce a child's sense of worth and connection. When their problems are dismissed or minimized, even with good intentions, it creates emotional distance. They may stop calling, stop opening up, or carry silent resentment. The brain, no matter the age, still longs to feel seen and understood by the people who raised it. Seniors sometimes forget that grown-up children still have fragile moments. They want empathy, not correction. Understanding, not comparison. Love, not lessons. The good news is this is one of the easiest things to shift. The next time your child shares something heavy, try pausing before reacting. Take a breath, listen fully. Then respond with words like, "That must be so hard," or "I can imagine how that would feel." You don't need to fix it, just be with them in it. That kind of quiet support builds a bridge no advice ever could. And with time, you'll notice the conversations start lasting longer. The tone gets warmer, and the distance begins to shrink. But emotional distance doesn't always come from words. Sometimes it comes from something even deeper. Years of subtle comparison that never quite went away. Let's explore that next. 2. You constantly compare them to their siblings or others. It often starts innocently, maybe even unintentionally, with just a simple comment like, "Your sister always remembers my birthday," or "At least your cousin Jenny made something of herself." You may not mean any harm. Perhaps you're trying to motivate them or express disappointment in a subtle way. But to your adult child, every time you compare them to someone else, especially a sibling, it feels like a sharp reminder that they were never fully enough in your eyes. That lingering sense of being less than doesn't just disappear with age. It grows deeper, more painful, and more silent over time. Take the story of Ronald and his two sons, Mike and Adam. Ronald is 75 now, a proud father who still brags about Adam's successful real estate business and his perfect family Christmas cards. Every time Mike visits, Ronald ends up talking about how Adam just bought another property, or how Adam's kids are doing so well in school. Mike, a high school art teacher, never says much. He smiles politely, changes the subject, then cuts the visit short. What Ronald doesn't know is that Mike drives home feeling smaller every time, like his quiet, modest life was never impressive enough to earn his father's pride. He doesn't tell his dad this, of course. He just stops visiting as often. He returns fewer calls. He quietly resents. This pattern isn't rare. In fact, it's one of the most emotionally damaging behaviors adult children report in long-term family dynamics. According to a 2021 study from the University of California, more than 60% of adults say they felt persistently compared to a sibling while growing up. And of that group, nearly half reported that those comparisons still affect their relationship with their parents well into adulthood. The brain remembers emotional patterns, especially those involving approval, worth, and identity. And when an adult child feels that a parent still favors someone else, even through small comments, it creates emotional distance and deep-seated pain. What makes this especially difficult is that comparison often comes from a place of concern or longing. You may be wishing one child called more, or that they made better choices, or lived a more stable life. But when that concern is voiced through contrast, it sounds like criticism. Adult children do not change when criticized. They change or open up when they feel loved, seen, and accepted as they are. Comparison closes hearts. Acceptance opens them. There's another layer to this as well. Comparison to people outside the family. Maybe you've said things like, "Mary down the street's daughter just got promoted," or "Linda's son sends her flowers every week." These remarks may seem like casual observations to you, but to your child, they are quiet verdicts. They feel judged against an invisible standard, one they didn't agree to, one they didn't know they were being measured up. And even if they don't say anything, trust me, they feel it, they remember it, and they slowly back away emotionally to protect themselves. So what can you do instead? The first step is awareness. Begin to notice when a compliment about someone else might be unintentionally sending a message of disappointment. Pause before saying, "Your sister always helps with the yard," and consider saying instead, "I really appreciate it when you're here." Shift from comparison to appreciation, from criticism to connection. Every time you feel tempted to contrast, replace it with a moment of genuine gratitude for the child in front of you. If they visit, thank them. If they call, tell them it made your day. If they share something personal, listen without correcting. These small shifts may feel simple, but they carry enormous weight. If you've spent years unknowingly comparing your children, don't let guilt take over. Let awareness lead the way. You can always start again with a simple conversation like, I realize now that I've said things that might have made you feel less seen. I want you to know I'm proud of you for exactly who you are. Words like that can heal decades of quiet pain, because ultimately our adult children don't need us to be perfect. They just need to feel safe around us. Safe from judgment, safe from comparison, safe to be themselves. But even when we offer love without comparison, the relationship can still suffer if the communication feels one-sided. If we're always giving advice and never asking for theirs, they may start to feel like we don't truly respect them as adults. And that's exactly what we'll explore next. 3, you give advice, but rarely ask for theirs. It's something many older parents do without even thinking, offering advice. After all, you've lived longer, seen more, made mistakes, learned lessons, and just want to help your children avoid the same pain. You're not trying to lecture or control, you're trying to love. But when advice is constantly given and almost never invited, it can begin to feel like a one-way street where you're always the speaker and they're always the listener. And for adult children who are now in their 30s, 40s, or 50s, that dynamic can quietly become exhausting. Take the story of Margaret, who's 74 and lives in Illinois. She's sharp, warm-hearted, and deeply involved in her family's life. Her son Jason is 46, divorced, and recently started a new job. Every time they talk, Margaret slips into advisor mode. You should tell your boss you need more flexibility. Don't date anyone until you're really sure. You're not saving enough for retirement. It's all said with love, concern, and the desire to protect. But Jason rarely feels heard. In fact, he stopped sharing the details of his life because he already knows the advice that's coming. And it's not what he's looking for. What he wants is a sounding board. A mom who asks, what do you think you'll do? Or do you want my thoughts? Or should I just listen? Instead, he gets a solution before he even finishes the sentence. And so, like many adult children, he slowly stops opening up. Not because he's angry, but because he feels unseen. There's a psychological term for this dynamic. It's called asymmetrical communication. It happens when one person holds the position of constant authority and the other becomes passive by default. Over time, the person receiving advice begins to feel inferior, as though their own instincts can't be trusted. And when that happens between a parent and their adult child, the relationship starts to lose intimacy. Advice that comes too quickly, too often, or too forcefully, no matter how wise, can feel like a wall instead of a bridge. Interestingly, studies from the University of Michigan's Institute for Social Research have shown that adult children are more likely to seek their parents' input when they feel emotionally respected. That respect often comes not from being told what to do, but from being asked, what do you think is best? When parents shift from directive to collaborative, their relationships tend to grow stronger, warmer, and more enduring. It's not about withholding your wisdom. It's about offering it when invited, not imposed. So what's the simple shift here? Ask first. Before giving advice, try saying, would you like my perspective on this? Or, I've been through something similar. Want to hear about it? This small question gives your child autonomy. It tells them you trust their judgment. And sometimes they'll say yes. Sometimes they'll say no. But in either case, you've shown that you respect them as their own person, not just as your child. And just as important, ask them for advice. You might be surprised by how much that means. Ask what they think about a purchase you're considering, or how they'd handle a neighbor situation, or what book they've read lately that made them think. When you ask for their thoughts, you're saying, I value you. That creates emotional balance. It restores the adult-to-adult connection. It tells them, you're not just my child, you're my equal. Margaret, after watching a video like this, decided to try something different. The next time Jason called, she listened more, asked open-ended questions, and held back her usual list of suggestions. At the end of the call, Jason said quietly, "Thanks for just being there, Mom." It was the first time in years that their conversation didn't end in tension. It ended in connection. And that's the real power of stepping back. Not to say less, but to hear more. Because advice can be valuable, but being heard is priceless. But even when we listen more and speak less, there's one habit that can still quietly erode the relationship. Guilt, especially the kind that shows up when visits are missed or calls go unanswered. And that's what we'll talk about next. 4, you guilt them about not visiting enough. It's easy to say things without realizing the emotional weight they carry. A simple sentence like, "I guess you're too busy for your old dad these days," or, "Well, you didn't call, but I'm used to being alone now," might sound lighthearted, even humorous. But for your adult children, it can feel like a punch in the heart. These comments, often wrapped in sarcasm or subtle sadness, don't bring families closer. They quietly push them away. And over time, what was once guilt becomes avoidance. Helen is 78 and lives alone in a quiet suburb outside of Pittsburgh. She loves her garden, her church group, and her memories, especially those of when her kids were little and the house was always full. Her daughter Lisa lives an hour away with 2 teenagers, a full-time job, and a mountain of responsibilities. Lisa tries to visit once a month, sometimes more, but Helen often greets her with phrases like, "I was starting to think you'd forgotten me," or "Your brother at least calls every week." Helen doesn't mean to hurt Lisa. In fact, she says these things because she misses her. But for Lisa, every visit begins with guilt and ends with emotional exhaustion. She starts to dread the calls. She starts visiting less. And in trying to express her sadness, Helen has unknowingly created more of the very loneliness she fears. Psychologists call this pattern emotional manipulation by guilt, and it often develops not out of malice but out of fear. Fear of being forgotten, fear of becoming irrelevant, fear of dying alone. For seniors, these fears are real and valid, but when expressed as blame toward their children, they become toxic. Adult children already carry so much weight: careers, parenting, financial stress, health challenges. When they feel that every call or visit is met with disappointment or guilt, they associate their parents with pain, and instinctively, they begin to withdraw. Studies published in the Journal of Family Communication have shown that guilt-based communication leads to reduced emotional intimacy between aging parents and their adult children. In fact, researchers found that adult children who consistently felt guilted by their parents reported lower satisfaction in the relationship and less frequent contact over time. The more guilt they felt, the more distance they created. Not out of rebellion, but out of emotional self-preservation. So what's the way forward? It starts with shifting from guilt to gratitude. Instead of saying, "You finally made time for me," try saying, "I'm so happy to see you today." Instead of "I guess you're too busy," say, "It means so much that you called." These small changes have a profound effect. They transform obligation into warmth. They make your child want to be around you, not because they have to, but because they feel welcomed. You can also try initiating more small connections that don't rely solely on their visits. Send a short text or email with a fond memory. Mail a funny article or an old photo. Let your child feel that you're reaching out with love, not waiting with disappointment. And if you're truly feeling lonely or sad, be honest, but be kind. Say, "I miss you lately. I know life is full, but I always look forward to our time together." That honesty invites compassion instead of guilt. It opens the heart instead of closing the door. Helen eventually began to notice that Lisa seemed distant. One day she watched a video much like this one and saw herself in every example. The next time Lisa visited, Helen smiled and said, "You being here is the best part of my week." Lisa teared up. For the first time in a long while, they sat and talked without tension. The visit lasted longer. The laughter came easier. And Helen realized something powerful. Being loved isn't about being needed. It's about being enjoyed. But sometimes what creates the deepest wounds in our relationships isn't what we say. It's what we stop saying. It's the silence, the emotional absence, the quiet drifting that happens when we no longer ask about their lives, their hopes, or their hearts. And that's what we'll explore in the next reason. 5, you don't realize how much you have emotionally checked out. Sometimes the greatest distance in a relationship isn't physical, it's emotional. And many parents don't even realize when it's happening. You're still there. You still answer the phone. You still ask if they're eating well or if the kids are okay. But somewhere along the way, the deeper conversations faded. You stopped asking about their dreams. You stopped sharing your heart. You stopped being emotionally present. And even if the relationship looks fine on the outside, polite, steady, routine, your children may quietly feel abandoned on the inside. Let me tell you about David and his mother, Ruth. David is 39, a middle school principal who lives 2 states away. He loves his mom. She raised him with strength and care after his father passed away early. But in the last 5 years, something has changed. When he calls, Ruth mostly talks about the weather, aches and pains, or her TV shows. She rarely asks about his work, his marriage, or how he's feeling. When he tries to open up, she listens for a moment, then says, "Well, that's life," and moves on. There's no malice in her voice, just a quiet detachment. And for David, it hurts more than anger ever could. He doesn't feel criticized. He feels invisible. This kind of emotional withdrawal is more common than people think. As we get older, many of us turn inward, focusing on our health, our memories, our routines. That's normal. But when it comes at the cost of emotional connection, it leaves a void in the people we love. Adult children often don't say anything because it feels selfish. They think, "Mom's getting older, I should let her talk about what she wants." But deep down, they're craving real connection. They want to feel like their parents still care who they are becoming, not just who they used to be. Neurologists and psychologists alike have found that emotional engagement, especially in older adults, has a significant impact on the quality of relationships and even cognitive health. When seniors continue to ask questions, show interest, and express emotions, it doesn't just help the relationship. It stimulates the brain, reduces loneliness, and strengthens bonds across generations. Emotional presence isn't just good for your children, it's good for you too. So how can you return to emotional presence if you've slowly drifted? It starts with curiosity. Ask questions that go deeper than "how's work?" Try "what's been on your heart lately?" or "what's bringing you joy these days?" Don't worry if it feels awkward at first. Just showing that you care to know already means everything. Share stories from your own life, not just about the past, but about how you're feeling now. If you're struggling, say so. If you're grateful, express it. Vulnerability builds trust, and trust reopens doors that may have been quietly shut. Also, listen with your full attention. Put the TV on mute, set the phone down, make eye contact, even over video calls. Say things like, "That means a lot to hear," or "Tell me more about that." These small acts of presence create big waves of connection. They let your children know that even at 70, 75, or 80, you are still here with them, emotionally and fully. Ruth, after noticing how short David's calls had become, finally asked, "Is there something I'm missing?" David hesitated, then gently said, "I miss when we used to really talk, Mom." Ruth took it to heart. The next week, she called him just to ask how his students were doing, how he was really feeling about work, and what he was excited for this year. David smiled for the rest of the day. One small change, one emotional spark, and the distance began to fade. Because it's not just the lack of emotion that creates resentment. It's the feeling that the parent has quietly left the conversation, even while still being physically present. But the beauty of this final reason is that it's never too late to come back. Emotional connection doesn't fade because of time. It fades because of disuse. And the moment you choose to open that door again, it swings wide with love. Now that we've walked through these 5 hidden reasons why your children might quietly feel resentment, let's pause, because this isn't just a list. It's a chance to understand, to reflect, and most importantly, to reconnect. Let's move into a moment of encouragement and talk about how every single one of these patterns can change, starting today. If you're still with me right now, that means this message matters to you. Drop a number 6 in the comments so I know you're still here. And don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss a new video made just for you. We've just uncovered 5 surprising and sometimes painful reasons why your children might be quietly pulling away after age 70. Maybe you've unintentionally dismissed their adult problems, thinking you were helping. Maybe you've compared them to others, not realizing how deeply those comments still sting. Maybe you've been giving advice without asking for theirs, making them feel unheard. Maybe you've guilted them about not visiting more when all you really wanted was to feel loved. And maybe, without even noticing, you've slowly checked out emotionally, becoming more distant when they needed you to lean in. But here's what matters most. Every single one of these can be changed. There is no shame in realizing you've made mistakes. That's part of being human. What defines us is what we choose to do next. It's never too late to have a new conversation. It's never too late to say, "I'm proud of you." It's never too late to listen with your whole heart, to show up with warmth, and to start again. One phone call, one hug, one honest word at a time. Because at the end of the day, love isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. And your presence, your full emotional presence, still matters more than you know. If something in this video spoke to your heart today, I'd love to hear from you. Share one thought, one feeling, or one lesson that stood out to you in the comments below. We read every single one, truly. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell so you won't miss any of our future videos created with care, just for you. Thank you for spending this time with me. Your presence here means more than you know. Together, we're building a space where wisdom, love, and second chances still matter. Take good care of yourself and your family. I'll see you in the next video.